Doug Trumbull is a man with an idea. And the idea is that movies could look more realistic and be more involving than they are.
Hi, I'm Doug Trumbull. When I was growing up, I was entranced with movies. I loved the giant screen spectacle of Cinerama and admired the directors who worked in this fantastic medium, drawing audiences into amazing and almost overwhelming immersive experiences. The Cinerama screens were 90 feet wide, and you felt surrounded by the deeply curved image. When George Marshall directed the train sequence in How the West Was Won, I was amazed at how he managed to adapt his directorial style to the ultra-wide 3-camera Cinerama medium. When David Lean made Lawrence of Arabia in 70mm Super Panavision, I was convinced that powerful dramatic stories could be told on the giant screen. My first experience working on a 70mm giant screen movie was as an illustrator on the Cinerama 360-degree dome screen movie To the Moon and Beyond for the New York World's Fair. It was like a planetarium with a movie instead of the sky. It was seen by Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke, confirming their belief that they could make what Stanley called the first good science fiction movie, also saying that he felt an obligation to make 2001: A Space Odyssey to be how the universe was won. When I was 23 working on 2001, Kubrick would often talk to me about his frustration with 24 frames per second, since there was so much blurring and strobing. He also complained that he was bored by conventional cinematic language and wanted the audience to feel that they were in space themselves. Shortly after completing 2001, I wrote and directed my first feature film, Silent Running, but it was conventional 35mm. I wanted my movie to be more immersive. After Silent Running, I formed Future General Corporation to explore the future of cinema. We tried different film formats such as VistaVision, Todd-AO, Super Panavision, and IMAX. We also shot tests at 24, 36, 48, 60, 66, and 72 frames per second. We attached sensors to the viewers in a laboratory, proving that high frame rates were the real key to improving human visual stimulation and creating a powerful sense of realism. We received a U.S. patent on what became known as ShowScan 60 frame per second 70mm film. Suddenly the surface of the screen went away. It became like a 3D movie even though it was 2D. Frame rates got you to much more like what reality is with us right now. This led to the business development of the ShowScan process of 70mm film at 60 frames per second.
It was astounding to see the kind of depth and dynamism that came from it.
At this point, I know of nothing else that is as exciting, as inventive, and as creatively stimulating as ShowScan.
What seems a reasonable cost, the conversion cost of the cinema, is less than I imagine it's going to be. And what is also good is the fact that they can convert back again to a regular system.
We couldn't get the movie industry to transition into it because the studios said, well, we'll make a movie, but where do we show it? And the exhibitors would say, we're not going to convert the theaters unless all the studios make movies. And so I was developing Brainstorm, which was a vehicle for ShowScan. At the time, the added cost of ShowScan's 65mm raw stock, processing, new projection equipment, and 70mm prints was a non-starter for the industry, and I was forced to make Brainstorm conventionally. This was a huge disappointment for me for many reasons. So I stopped writing and directing and began the long haul to find a new way to make movies that would be more immersive, more spectacular, and more involving than they are. One of my most challenging projects was Back to the Future: The Ride for Steven Spielberg and Universal, shot in OmniMax 15 perf 70mm, projected onto a giant domed screen.
The real hero behind this is Douglas Trumbull, who really put it together and created the visuals, which really is what the ride's all about.
In that ride, you became Marty McFly and entered into the story. It proved to me that it is possible for you to virtually leave your seat and be surrounded by the movie, participating in the action. But again, 24 frames per second, low brightness, and cross-reflection in the dome required a tremendous effort to make the image seem immersive. A couple of years later, I merged my company with IMAX and helped take IMAX public. I'm very proud of proving that you can bring a new technology into the mainstream of the movie business. So that made me fearless. Yeah, you can bring something new into the conventional movie industry. You can actually change the shape of theaters. You can change the screen size. You can change the film size. You can do all these things.
I think anything that enhances the theatrical experience, anything that makes the movie, you know, something to see in a cinema as opposed to waiting for it to show up on your iPad is a good thing.
James Cameron made Avatar, which was the most technologically complex 3D movie ever made, and it became the highest grossing movie of all time. I found out that the projectors are running at 144 frames a second. I'm saying, what? 144? That's fat. That's twice as much as ShowScan was. And you're doing it already? And there's thousands of projectors out there that do that? And they said, well, yeah, they do, but nobody uses it. Could we do a new frame every flash? They said, well, yeah, you could, but no one does it. I researched a number of digital camera companies such as Arri, Red, Sony, Panavision, Canon, and others, finding out that they could all run at 60 frames per second effortlessly and at 4K resolution. When I found out that Christie had developed the Mirage 4K projector capable of running 3D at 120 frames per second, I realized it was now time for me to get back to making movies. I began shooting tests of 3D at 4K resolution and invented the Magi process as the ultimate way to completely get rid of blurring and strobing forever. In this scene from the Transformers, Michael Bay wants to have spectacular fast action, but look at all this blurring. It is expensive to render in CGI, and blurring is destroying the detail of these very expensive production values. 100% of the action is captured at 120 frames per second rather than the conventional 24. Although more CGI frames need to be rendered, render time is simplified since there is much less blur.
We showed 48 and 60. They're both highly superior to 24. What I think is clear is we've got to get off 24.
In the 3D world, a movie will be shot with two cameras running in sync at 24 frames per second each. Just like recording with a single camera, each frame will be exposed for a 48th of a second. 50% of the action will be lost forever because of the shutter closures. 3D movies are usually projected with a single projector that will alternately flash each left and right frames 3 times, resulting in a total of 144 flashes. These triple flashes contain no motion since they're repeats of the same frames. While shooting 48 frames per second in 3D, as director Peter Jackson did with the Hobbit trilogy, the cameras work generally the same way, although they used a 270-degree shutter. Every frame is still capturing only part of the action, because the shutters were still closed for 90 degrees. This is what happens when playing back 48 frames per second. Every right and left frame is shown 2 times. The problem here is that the frames will be shot in sync, but will be projected sequentially out of sync, which means that there is still no perfect temporal continuity, and each frame is still flashed 2 times. So shooting at 60 frames per second in 3D with a 180-degree shutter, the projector will alternately flash each left and right eye only once, resulting in 120 flashes per second, significantly reducing blurring and strobing. Just like with 48 frames per second, the frames were shot in sync, but will still be projected sequentially, so there is still no perfect temporal continuity. Magi is shooting in a way that will match the cadence of photography to the cadence of the projector. At 60 frames per second, the camera shutters can be set out of sync, so that when one camera shutter is closed, the other is open. In this way, every frame captures a unique moment in time and matches the cadence of the projector. The final image contains perceptively no motion blur. All action is captured. Another way to achieve this result is to shoot with 2 cameras in sync at 120 frames per second each, with a shutter of 360 degrees. Then, we achieve perfect temporal continuity by deleting odd and even frames from each left and right eye image stream, resulting in 60 frames per second per eye with the correct cadence. Trumbull Studios has already developed a complete Magi end-to-end post-production pipeline that includes immediate 4K on-set review, proxy output for editorial, and a workflow that is easy to use with conventional technologies that include compositing, grading, and finishing to the highest possible standards. The Magi DCP format has been successfully demonstrated in the summer of 2014 and enables any movie made in Magi to be distributed globally and is fully compatible with tens of thousands of DCI-compliant 2K and 4K DLP projectors with Series 2 electronics and includes full DCI copy protection. Magi is also fully compatible with nearly all 3D technologies in the market today, including RealD, Dolby, and active classes. This includes dual projection systems as well as the emerging new 6P laser illuminated systems as we showed at IBC and the Giant Screen Cinema Association. Magi and Magi DCP is vastly superior to conventionally produced 24 frames per second 3D movies, as well as 48 and 60 Hz 2K and 4K high frame rate formats. While further down conversion to 24 frames per second in 3D or 2D is indistinguishable from a conventional native 24 frame per second production and exhibition. You can project the 120, but when you need 24 for conventional release, you can blend 3 frames together and delete the next 2 to recover the blur and image feel that is necessary for 24 frames to look smooth. Seeing a 3D movie in a theater at low brightness and on a conventional size screen is becoming less compelling with the low cost and convenience of downloading or streaming on ever-improving tablets and smartphones with bright and vivid colors. If you want spectacle and immersion, it better be spectacle and immersion. My producer wife, Julia, and I built Trumbull Studios. Located in western Massachusetts, we have blended a farm environment with our high-technology R&D, solving a wide range of challenges in our new stage and studio, complete with workshops, living quarters, production offices, and Magi screening room. I have written and directed a short experimental movie called Euphotog, shot in the Magi process at 120 frames per second rather than the conventional 24. Each frame is shown only once. It has been shot in 3D at 4K and can be projected in 2K or 4K at 120 frames. The cameras were Canon C500s. The stereo rig was a 3-ality TS5. We used Christie Mirage 4K projection. The soundtrack was mixed in Dolby Atmos. High resolution, high frame rate, large screen size, great bit depth, terrific 3D. It's all these things put together.